Hey everyone, I'm excited to show you my presentation for my lesson plan. So my standard that I was trying to cover was how tensions over slavery arose in America from 1820 to 1840, and I specifically focused on the largest slave rebellion in U.S. history, which was Nat Turner's slave rebellion. Um, Everything that I was posting was put onto Google Classroom, so that was how students were able to receive all of the different supplies or resources for this lesson. The lesson followed a gradual release program. So that meant that I did 3 different assignments kind of within this one lesson. The first assignment was very teacher-based. The second one was collaborative-based between the students themselves and me as the teacher. And then the third one was independent practice. So the first thing that I did was I used a Nearpod to go through and explain the information needed to know about Nat Turner's rebellion and the era of this time period. I liked using Nearpod because it allows for there to be a level of accountability in classroom management. I can insert these interactive questions that students have to answer. So that way I know that they're receiving the information. I would be on a Zoom probably going through this with students virtually, or if they're in the classroom, I'm going through it with them synchronously. So I'm doing the teaching at this part of the lesson. The second assignment that we would do would be titled Nat Turner, the Man, the Myth, the Legend, which would be a document analysis assignment. And what would happen would be students would actually be put into groups, and then they would be given this Google Doc, and this Google Doc would be shared with an entire class. So for example, 2B would get this entire document, and each group would be assigned 2 to 3 different documents. This allows for us to go through several documents very quickly so students can use them in the future. The documents would be right here on a Google Doc, and then the document analysis rubric would be right here. I like doing this group activity because it causes us to have some differentiation. My lower level learners, the students who struggle with document analysis, I usually team up in smart grouping with peer leaders, students who are really, really good at working with other students and understand the information really a lot more. It allows for those stronger learners to kind of be stretched out to teach my lower level learners how to do document analysis. After they would go through that, the final assignment would be titled Nat Turner's Historical Commission Project, which is where they would be either posting a Flipgrid or a podcast between 3 and 5 minutes, discussing as a historical analyst if a high school in Virginia should be renamed Nat Turner High School or what potential controversies could arise from that. So I would have a outline for them to kind of follow along. I like this potential pushback for enrichment. Basically, you've given me your decision. What would people criticize your decision for? And can you provide additional justification to push back on that criticism? And then my rubric would be right here. The 2 different tools that students would use for this, one would be called Anchor, where they would be able to record a podcast like this. And then the second would be a Flipgrid, where they could just go in and record a response right here. Flipgrid would be video-based. So these would be students who are more interested in kind of acting on screen. I wanted them to kind of stay in character through the whole thing. Anchor would be more students who want this to be more narrative focused, obviously just voice. And one of the things that didn't quite go as well as I thought is I only had about 2 students choose to do the podcast per class, and about 25 did the Flipgrid. This was because the Flipgrid, I learned, was a much more used tool by students. Most of them had never used Anchor. And so because of that, they obviously went with the tool that they knew more about. I guess going forward, maybe I would try to pre-assign students based off what maybe I think their strengths are, because I think some of them could have done a much better job actually doing the podcast if they had just given it time to learn it. Maybe I could do a tutorial also more on how Anchor works, although I did provide a quick tutorial in class. Maybe they needed more something in depth. The final thing we would do is we would listen to a podcast. This would be a reflective or a closing activity from a historian named Kenneth Greenberg. It's only about 8 minutes, where they would answer these questions because Kenneth Greenberg gives a definitive answer on how he thinks Nat Turner should be remembered. And I would ask students if that challenges or confirms their bias or views on this topic.